Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Faster Science, HEOR, RWE, and Market Access Sourcing, sponsored by Scientistcom and HealthEconomics.com. I'm Dana Minyard, Director of Technology at HealthEconomics.com. I'd like to thank you for taking time to join us in our ongoing webinar series provided by HealthEconomics.com. We're so glad you're here. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules. You should see a control panel on your desktop. You can minimize this control panel by clicking the arrow located top left of the panel. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you prefer to join over the phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Today's webinar will be very interactive. Submit your questions at any time during the webinar using the questions section of the control panel. We will address as many as possible, both interspersed through the presentation as well as at the end of the webinar. In the handouts section on the control panel, you'll find 3 documents that are available for you to download. 2 flyers explain the HEOR and RWE Marketplace, one for the buyers of research services and one for the supplier. There is also a poster from our benchmarking study on HEOR and RWE sourcing presented at the 2019 ISPOR annual meeting. The benchmarking study will be discussed in detail by Dr. Peeples in the webinar. We invite you to engage with us and each other on social media by tweeting or sharing what you're learning in the webinar on LinkedIn or Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at www_healthecon and at scientist_com. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers and panelists. Meet Dr. Patti Peeples. Patti is a health economist and pharmacist with 30 years of experience in health economics and outcomes research. She is founder and CEO of HealthEconomics.com and principal researcher at HE Institute. Dr. Peeples has served in senior positions in medical affairs, health outcomes, and product management at multiple biopharma companies, and has taught and mentored many students and young executives. Extensively published in the peer-reviewed literature, Dr. Peeples also serves on several journal editorial boards, including the American Journal of Managed Care, Journal of Clinical Pathways, and the Journal of HEOR. Welcome, Maria Negron. Maria is a biomedical engineer skilled in sales and business development with experience in diagnostics and medical devices. Prior to joining Scientist.com, Maria worked with a global network of distributors in more than 35 countries to launch a novel diagnostics test. Additionally, she executed marketing strategies and launch plans for medical devices in the US market. She joined Scientist.com in 2018 and is currently the category director for the RWE and HEOR space at Scientist.com, where she works to create and implement new features for the category to transform sourcing within the Scientist.com marketplace. Part of her role includes developing and executing RWE and HEOR strategies alongside clients. And finally, meet David Brown. David is the Senior Director of Business Development at Scientist.com, where he has developed new clients, both large and small, for the past 4 years. He has an MS in nutritional biochemistry from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and has spent his recent career growing technology startups in both e-commerce and procurement. Welcome to our staff today. Dr. Peeples, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dana, and welcome to all of you. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to spend an hour with you today. If you would show our agenda, please. We're going to kick off today's presentation with the results from an industry benchmarking study that we conducted on sourcing trends in HEOR and RWE. Then Maria is going to provide an overview of the collaborative relationship between Scientistcom and HealthEconomics.com to build the online portal for sourcing and procurement with the HEOR and RWE Marketplace. She's also going to show you some use cases of how the marketplace has been utilized to shorten those contracting times, find new suppliers, and enable the comparison of RFPs. And then she'll show you an example of how a buyer would actually utilize the marketplace to place a project. We're going to close out with a panel that includes Dave. Dave Brown is on the front lines working with clients on utilizing the marketplace, and he brings the perspective from current users. We're going to have a Q&A where you'll have a chance to get all of your questions answered. So let's get started. Next slide. Let's kick it off, Dana, with the poll. I hope all of you will please answer this to give us a sense of who's online. Would you please respond if you are primarily a buyer, a supplier, both a buyer and a supplier, or neither? Let us know where you stand. Give you a couple of seconds. All right, let us know. It looks like we've got a little more than half of you are suppliers, and about a fifth of you are in the buyer role, and 11% are currently not in the place of buying or supplying. And so we welcome all of you. I think you'll be able to get all of your questions answered no matter where you sit in the organization. Next slide, please. So let's kick it off with the top level view. As you know, and you're well aware, that there is continued growth in the HEOR and RWE arena. But of course, you know that things have changed a bit since COVID. I think possibly that the COVID arena has bolstered the RWE market. These reports, which were produced prior to the pandemic, note that the RWE market is expected to have a compound annual growth rate of about 15%, while the HEOR arena is growing at about a 13% rate. Next slide. So it was precisely that growth in the HEOR and RWE market that caused many of Scientist.com's clients to come to them and ask them to expand the development of a marketplace from where they were previously focused, which was predominantly in early clinical. And the clients asked them if they would build a marketplace that would enable the growth in RWE and HEOR sourcing. So they did. And we have partnered together to present this marketplace to you. But before we kicked that off, we did an industry benchmarking survey to better understand what some of your challenges are. Until this research, to our knowledge, no one had ever looked into HEOR and RWE procurement challenges. 150 of you responded from around the globe, 71% out of North America, 17% Europe, and about 7% Asia. And in terms of company type, about a third of you were from biopharma and another 37% were from the consulting and CRO space. And about 42% of you represented very large employers, meaning those with employees of 5,000 or more. The job function of the respondents is about what you would expect from the HealthEconomics.com audience. About 47%, almost half of you identify with HEOR. About 11% have a title or responsibility that's solely around RWE, and about 27% in market access and pricing. If you'd like to get a copy of this white paper, you see the URL right there, or feel free just to reach directly out to me or to Maria, and we'll hook you up. Next slide, please, Dana. It'll come as no surprise to you at all that outsourcing is incredibly common in the HEOR and RWE arena. In fact, 71% say that you outsource more than half of your work. And in fact, a third of you outsource or contract all of it. So given this, it was clear to us that solutions that can improve that outsourcing process would be useful. When we asked some of the challenges, this is what you told us. You said a really common point of frustration is how long it takes to get from the RFP process to an executed contract. I imagine that sounds familiar to you. About 56% of you said it takes more than 2 months, and in fact, another fourth said it takes 3 months or more. And stunningly, almost 10% said that the contract execution time can be between 6 to 12 months. This really won't do. As one of the HEOR directors said in the quote you see there, it takes too long to get up and running, thus compressing the timelines for actually getting the work done. Slow contracting times also impedes getting those projects into the field. It slows down the decision making on it and then ultimately affects the access of the product to the patient. So we wanted to do something about that, hence the marketplace. We found that in asking you that another challenge was the fact that these procurement or sourcing processes were not standardized. About 80% said it was very difficult to navigate all of the different buyer processes from one client to another. As one HEOR consultant said, the procurement process differs between each buyer. It's impossible to streamline on our end. We also found that 67% of you said that the compliance requirements differed from each buyer and that was another hindrance into successful contracting. And of course, we all know that there is the preferred supplier challenge. While it brings some benefits, it brings some challenges. So it was particularly recognized that in a complex field like HEOR and RWE, limiting procurement to preferred suppliers often makes expert-based contracting work really difficult. It can increase cost and reduce quality, says one of your colleagues. And any kind of solutions that could streamline that process and give you the ability to reinforce the desired skills or capabilities in a supplier may be really advantageous. Next slide, please. So certainly, I don't think there's anybody online that wouldn't agree that key performance indicators are an important business tool. They help us execute and do our work better. However, because of the unique nature in HEOR and RWE, we found that the KPIs that are used by sourcing and procurement groups as they execute for a early clinical or for commercialization departments, those KPIs may not work that well for HEOR and RWE sourcing. 70% of you agree that there are mismatches between the KPIs used by the sourcing department and what's important to you. Now, note the quote by that senior global manager of CRO. Says that processes for many of the HEOR RWE projects differ from the parameters the outsourcing group uses for other groups. Another stated a KPI mismatch challenge is the rigidity in the evaluation philosophies that are centered upon one dimension, such as something used in accounting or general financial metrics. It's hoped that there will be a greater understanding of specifically what you're looking for in an ideal supplier. Almost 2/3 of organizations have a dedicated outsourcing group, but only about 20% of you noted that there was a specialized procurement individual or department that focused on HEOR in RWE. And further, when we asked the buyers, they said that about 59% said that they struggled, once they got the proposals in, struggled with an ability to compare in an apples to apples manner across the suppliers for an individual project. So we've got these conflicting occurrences. We've got increased HEOR and RWE study volume and complexity, but there's also an increase in the standardization of procurement processes that is occurring in many of your organizations. And this essentially turns into HEOR departments having a little bit less of an ability to compare and choose suppliers, as well as less input into how they'd like to execute that project. So if there is a way that can help you gain greater alignment between your KPIs and your preferences on suppliers with the procurement department, then we believe that this is going to help you, whether you're a buyer or a supplier, have better visibility of your projects to senior management, help improve vendor selection, and ultimately execute faster research. Next slide, Dana. We explored how buyers and suppliers were connected in the project conceptualization stage. About 60% of you noted that it is difficult to find that supplier, and then, as we noted earlier, to compare their skill sets. As you see in the quotes there in the green box, I wonder if this resonates with any of you. As a buyer, you might wonder, who has the expertise in this particular therapeutic area, or who has a database that might answer my particular question? It's challenging for you to answer that question. And then on the consulting side, the supplier notes that we sometimes get defined as a company who only does one particular thing when we have skills across many areas. The buyers note that it's hard to find those suppliers, and the suppliers note that it's difficult to connect with all of the different buyers they want to and to showcase their skills. Next slide. Next slide, please, Dana. So clearly those suppliers need a way to showcase their skill sets. Researchers need a way to evaluate the attributes in a comprehensive, validated group of suppliers, and we'll all benefit if there is increased diversity in both of those pools to execute our HEOR and RWE research. Next slide. So our benchmarking study showed that the unmet needs were, we are desiring shorter contracting time, greater consistency in the buying processes, expanded group of suppliers to have access to, an easier, more efficient way to connect buyers with suppliers, and ultimately working on standardizing those KPIs for HEOR and RWE. Next slide. So we took all of those unmet needs and developed the HEOR and RWE Marketplace. HealthEconomics.com and Scientistcom partnered together to connect researchers like you and suppliers in the HEOR RWE arena with the aim to streamline that sourcing process that results in trimmed cost, and it moves projects through to conclusion a little bit faster. Next slide. So we're going to give you a peek into the marketplace, but we're going to start with one more audience poll. Which department has primary responsibility for managing the contracting process for your area? Is it the researchers? Is it sourcing and procurement? Is it Clin Ops? Or is it commercialization? please select one for the primary responsibility for the contracting process. All right. So it looks like about 50% of you have, if you're in a buyer role, have responsibility for that. And then 38% in sourcing and procurement. What's interesting is that I think we've done this poll now several other times. I believe that sourcing and procurement percentage goes up with each time that we ask this question. All right, thank you, Dana. Let's close out that poll. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn over the dais, if you will, to Maria Negron. Maria?
Thank you, Patti. So now I'll go into the digital solutions, the use cases for the marketplace, and then finally a live demo so we can show you a little bit of a sneak peek into how the marketplace works. Dana, okay, perfect. So the health economics HEOR and RWE Marketplace, which is powered by Scientistcom, was created, as Patti mentioned, with the purpose of connecting buyers and sellers of HEOR and RWE services. So what we aim to do is to connect large or small research organizations with a curated network of global suppliers that provide those RWE and HEOR services. So in terms of the services that are covered, the suppliers typically provide services in all major areas of HEOR, RWE, and market access, including value dossiers, cost-benefit analysis, patient-reported outcomes, among others. So we've listed slides. There's only some of the research areas offered, but in total, there's more than 60 that are offered in the marketplace. So next slide, please, Dana. So Scientistcom is one of the companies that powers the HEOR and RWE Marketplace, and we are a B2E marketplace for outsourced research. So the company was founded in 2007 and headquartered in San Diego. We have offices all over the world, for example, in Boston, where I am based, and then subsidiaries in the UK and Japan. In total, we have around 60 full-time employees all over. So everywhere where our clients are located, we have employees to support, and had 200 million in marketplace sales in 2019. So this has allowed us to win awards, like being recognized by Inc.com as one of the 500 fastest growing private US companies, which we're very proud of. In terms of who we work with, we currently work with top pharmaceutical companies, and Scientistcom is the world's largest marketplace for outsourced research. And in a few slides, I'll go into detail about who exactly our clients are. But I'll give you a bit of history as to HEOR in the marketplace itself. So typically, as Patti mentioned earlier, Scientistcom initially focused on providing access to preclinical services. But since then, we've expanded into most major research areas, including HEOR and RWE. So regarding this space, we entered in 2016 when one of our biggest clients approached us because they understood the value that we added in other areas, and they believed that we could solve some of their challenges for HEOR and RWE. So we spent the subsequent months understanding their challenges, communicating with suppliers to understand challenges from that side as well. And then we went live with the category in 2017. So next slide, please. Since then, there has been a significant growth in the category. So many of you may have not worked with Scientistcom in this area before. So I wanted to provide a perspective on the stability and growth. As of the end of 2019, there was a 191% increase in spend, 186% order volume increase compared to the previous year, and then hundreds of requests sent out by clients. So this growth has positioned RWE and HEOR as one of the highest spend categories within the entire Scientistcom marketplace, and then ultimately led us to our partnership with healtheconomics.com and the creation of this RWE and HEOR marketplace as well. Next slide, please. So the HEOR and RWE Marketplace is a collaboration between healtheconomics.com, which is the world's leading online HEOR connected community, and Scientist.com, as I mentioned, pharma's largest marketplace for outsourced research. So we initiated the partnership because we understood there's an increased need for access to HEOR and real-world data to make faster and more informed healthcare decisions, and then ultimately help guide treatment approaches. So what we aim to do is foster researcher and supplier collaborations on a single platform that we will aim to simplify the research process and then also save on cost. Patti, anything you'd like to add from your side?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I think probably one of the most common emails I receive multiple times a week are from you asking if I can help you identify a particular supplier that can meet your research need. There's just an incredible challenge in the industry, and I think it's getting even bigger, Maria, as there's more and more data analytics companies and groups that have these RWE databases for buyers to know who's out there doing the kind of good work that could really advance their capabilities.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Patti. So next slide, Dana, please. In terms of who we work with, as I previously mentioned, Scientistcom is the industry's leading V2E marketplace, and we work with 24 of the top 30 pharmaceutical companies and also more than 60 biotechs. So in this slide, you can see the company's trajectory and growth. As of the end of 2019, we have partnered with more than 85 companies to create their custom marketplaces. Next slide, please. On the supplier side, which you may be wondering, we also have an extensive global network that continues to grow and expand. So we have more than 200 suppliers signed up to perform RWE and HEOR service. And as a buyer, you can work with any of these suppliers right away. So as you can see in the map, we have an extensive global network and a presence in Asia, Latin America, Europe, and North America, with most suppliers located in the US and the UK. So as a buyer, if you want to work with a supplier that's not currently on the marketplace, we have a dedicated supplier team that can help you get these suppliers onboarded. Alternatively, if you're a supplier and you wish to sign up, please let us know, and then we'll work with you to get you onboarded and provide you access and visibility to all of the client base that we just went through. Next slide, please. So in terms of the challenges that we have, so we've worked with buyers and suppliers to understand some of their specific challenges within the field, and these are some of the major ones that were consistent within our network. So the first one was data access. So we know that there's a lot of data out there and many different specifications, but it's hard to know what supplier has access to what data. So ideally, we will help buyers find access to this raw data, and then we'll also help suppliers showcase their capabilities. This, of course, ties up a complex supplier base. So Scientist.com can provide visibility to which supplier has specific data, which is especially important in a field where the landscape is constantly changing. Another challenge that we came up with was that it's difficult to compare RFPs, and of course, accurate comparisons are essential for such high-value projects. So managing the entire process within one platform in the RWE and HEOR Marketplace is essential for these projects because it allows for direct apples-to-apples comparisons, which is not only cost-effective, but also more efficient, which allows for the reduction of contracting time as well. Next slide, please. So after understanding the challenges, we built the following functionalities to solve them. So we curated about 60 different service offerings based on easy to browse categories. So what you see here on the right are some of these different services. If you click on any of them, you can initiate a request, and then you'll be able to see as a buyer all the suppliers that can perform that service, or as a supplier, you will be able to showcase those services to clients if you do perform them. Within the same request page, you'll also be able to view detailed descriptions of suppliers as a buyer, including capabilities, ratings, and then as proposals are submitted, it's possible to compare them side by side. And finally, the marketplace provides analytics and allows you to track metrics for all the projects, not only open, but also past requests are stored. Next slide, please. In terms of the research areas that we work with, these are some examples of popular research areas that can be found on the marketplace. So as you can see, we have a wide range of services, anywhere from low cost, high demand projects like systematic literature reviews to high cost, high demand projects like patient reported outcomes or pricing strategies. So the research listings cover all major areas within RWE, HEOR, and the market access space as well. Next slide, please. So another way that you can locate supplier capabilities, or as a supplier showcase your capabilities, is to complete and review the HEOR and RWE RFIs. So this includes sections on data, product, and innovation, and it's one of the solutions that we have built to tackle the complex supplier-based issue. So the RFI allows suppliers to differentiate themselves and highlight their areas of expertise. And then on the buyer side, it allows users to identify suppliers that best meet their needs for specific projects. So the RFI is completed by suppliers at the moment that they sign up. And additionally, suppliers complete a commercial due diligence RFI just to make sure that everything checks up, which includes sections on confidentiality, anti-bribery, and corruption, among others. The most essential part of the supplier sign-up process, I would say, is the universal RWE and HEOR legal agreement. So the agreements are set up in a way that provide a direct contractual relationship between buyer and supplier. So it's the same as you would have off-platform, which means that Scientist.com is not a distributor of any sort. We have just set up a partnership or an agreement in conjunction with our buyers and suppliers, and it includes service-specific clauses, including licenses and payment transparencies, for example, very similar to the ones that you would negotiate off-platform. So something to point out is that the same agreement is utilized by multiple biopharma and all the suppliers that have signed up. And what this really means is that as a buyer, you can work with any supplier right away without having to set up a separate MSA, which reduces contracting time anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, which is one of the biggest benefits that we see from the marketplace. Next slide. So the marketplace functionalities that we just went over ultimately lead to 3 key benefits. So the first that we see is quicker time to insight, which allows buyers to select suppliers quicker and then suppliers to respond to more requests. This is connected to a reduced time to contract, which comes from our standardized legal structure and streamlined vendor setup process. And ultimately, the marketplace leads to faster market access by allowing buyers to access a global curated supplier network that leads to more efficient evidence development. So Patti, let me pause and see if we have any questions from the audience before we continue.
We do indeed, and here's a good opportunity for me to encourage you to continue to send in your questions. We're going to do this several times throughout the webinar, and so make sure let us hear from you. So I have a question from an individual that says, can I initiate a request without having a complete proposal set up if they're just at the place of really in project conceptualization and want to better understand who's out there that can give them some guidance on refining the proposal? What's the process there, Maria?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question that we hear a lot, actually. So what we suggest is to initiate the request as early as possible. In fact, initially, many people or buyers think that they can only initiate a request once their proposal is completed, when in fact, we suggest starting it out as early as possible to really scope out the market. The reason behind this is that there might be new technologies or new suppliers that you might not know of that might help you shape that project in the best or most efficient way possible. Something to add as well is that Scientist.com has a research concierge, which means that anytime you submit a request, then they will review the request and they can also help you through the process in terms of supplier selection. If you have particular expertise, they can guide you through navigating the RFIs. So the earlier you place the request, the faster you will be able to check out in the long term. So definitely encourage to do it as early as possible.
Great. Yeah, I think the research concierge is a bit of a hidden benefit that can help the buyer better understand who's out there that can fulfill their needs.
Of course.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Patti. So back to the presentation. Now I'd like to highlight a few case studies from our existing buyers that we currently work with. So the first one is a feasibility study for real-world evidence. So the user wanted to determine the feasibility of a secondary source data for a lung cancer study. So the challenge that they had were that they were unfamiliar with the suppliers and their capabilities. So they knew their project they wanted to complete, but they were unsure about the correct database to source from and how to find those suppliers. So they placed a request through the marketplace, and they were able to converse with 11 different suppliers and then review 4 proposals before purchase. So in this case, the marketplace allowed researchers to understand potential capabilities and then find the most qualified suppliers as well. The next one, Dana, perfect. So the second case study is a systematic literature review and a feasibility assessment for an indirect treatment comparison in the therapeutic area of heart failure. So this was a very specific one, and they were interested in cost savings as well as, of course, quality of the proposal. So they sent out their request through the marketplace, and they were able to have 5 different supplier responses and proposals. As you can see, the quotes range anywhere from $85,000 to $163,000. They finally selected a quote somewhere in the middle, around $126,000. So this was a very complex request that led to a proposal within 7 days, and an additional cost savings of more than $20,000 were realized just by submitting the request through the marketplace. So highly encouraged to bid out to many different suppliers and see what's out there. So the next slide is just some testimonials from our users. So users that we've worked with in the past have shown very positive feedback from the marketplace. For example, one director of global health economics considers the platform very user-friendly. One of the biggest benefits, as Patti mentioned, from the marketplace is that there's a research concierge team from the Scientistcom that chases up really fast. So they're not only there to help if you have any questions about the request, but also just making sure everything goes smoothly. So in some cases, we've heard that this is even faster than internal procurement, and it's very convenient for contracting and time savings. So other issues that they had before at this pharma company was that at the end of year, director of payer evidence said that they would need to spend time chasing vendors that had not been paid, for example. And in this case, using the platform, they don't need to do this because the team follows up, and that saves researchers a lot of time so they can focus on the science. So the value is streamlining approvals, legal, and the fact that it's easy to use as well and everyone is responsive. So we've heard positive feedback as well that an associate director of health economics prefers working through the marketplace than internally because of logistics, invoicing, and then it's easy to obtain that competitive pricing all through one platform. So going on to the last slide before our panel, Dana, in summary, just wanted to highlight that the marketplace can provide buyers direct access to more than 200 pre-contracted suppliers that can perform services in more than 60 research areas, leading to 6 to 8 weeks of time savings, and then an average of more than 15% cost savings just from bidding a request out. So thank you very much, Patti. Just wanted to thank you before we dive into the panel.
Wonderful. All right, Dave, let us see you. We're going to have a panel and do some Q&A. Hello.
Hello.
We've got several questions coming in, so let's jump right in. Do buyers need to register ahead of time, or can they just go to the website and start a procurement activity?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you have multiple options, Patti. You can sign up ahead of time if you'd like to, if you're looking to do, one of our custom built marketplaces. But you can go straight onto the marketplace and create an account, agree to some terms and services and start a research project right away.
And how do I know if a supplier is legitimate? And what kind of processes does Scientist.com put in place for that?
Great question. So Maria touched on a couple of those during her presentation. And first, it's that we sign them up just like any other large organization would sign up a vendor. They go through a vendor onboarding process. They have an RFI that they can fill out. So we gather a lot of information ahead of time about that supplier. And then from there, we also plug them into a LexisNexis monitoring system, which is, it's a legal system. It's looking for negative press and debarments and FDA letters and things like that would preclude them from participating in our platform. But the last two are probably the most important to everybody on this webinar. Number one, our concierge team is rating them based off of their behavior on the platform. So if they're actively participating, they're responding for bids, they're winning bids, you're going to be able to see a lot of that information. And our concierge team can also recommend and identify suppliers based off that information. So that's just really, real world practical information for each user. And then finally, we have a rating system. It's not unlike Yelp, where you can go and see a star rating that the users generate, and those are actually shared across all of our major platforms. So you're going to get a nice insight into what the users think about each one of the suppliers as well. So we call it our 360-degree view of each supplier, and it works pretty well from a user perspective.
Yeah, 5 years ago, there were not as many suppliers in the arena of HEOR and RWE, but nowadays the field has just expanded enormously. And so I think that next level of evaluation is particularly helpful. Maria, you mentioned that the platform enables one to track analytics. I'm really intrigued by that. I'm thinking if I was a buyer, a global buyer, I might be interested to know if my company had contracted this type of project in the past, what might be some historical evaluation of pricing and vendors, or from a supplier perspective, be able to see how many projects they bid on and got or didn't get. Can you talk a little bit about what analytics come out of the system?
Yeah, that's a great question, one that we also get a lot. So in terms of the buyer side, all the information that is in the system will be stored forever. That means that you'll be able to access requests from past requests from years ago, for example. So many of our clients decide to use us across the years, and they're able to see how pricing has changed, or even how different departments have used the marketplace differently. So we're really able to nail down from the supplier side the savings that are the savings for each individual request, but also the spend for each group, for each location, for each region, so they can start to see how the spend trends have changed from one year to the other, even from one quarter or month to the other, as to what users are purchasing and what different organizations. And then from the supplier side, that's also stored as well. So the suppliers are able to see all the different proposals that they've been added on, the ones that they've won. Also, an invoice tracking is really easy. So it's all stored within the system, and we're able to provide a great level of detail from both sides.
I can see that competitive intelligence being really, really helpful. At the top of the hour, we ask if you're a buyer or a supplier or both. And in fact, many folks out there, many groups out there do function as both. Maybe they subcontract and buy services like buying a database, but yet they're conducting the full analytic process themselves. How does it work, Dave, if they want to register as both a buyer and a supplier, or is that even possible?
Yeah, it's actually very possible. And, some of our, as you mentioned, some of our larger, CROs out there have, do both all the time. So, number one, if interested in registering as a buyer, you can go onto the site and go through it quite quickly. If you're interested in an enterprise level solution, that's something I'd be happy to talk with you about. And that would be, beyond yourself, maybe as a user, and maybe it's something for your entire company. And then as far as registering as a supplier, it's the same issue, same deal, very simple to do. We have a supplier onboarding team that would be happy to talk to you. And they'll guide you through how to get onboarded onto the platform, how to build your profile. And so you can do it both ways, quite simply.
Mm-hmm. And is there a subscription that's required on the buyer side, or how does that work?
There is not as a single user. If you guys are interested in an enterprise marketplace, there are some fees involved with that. We have some basic startup fees. Really depends on the size of the organization and what you're interested in purchasing. Happy to discuss that, offline after the webinar with anybody that's interested. And then from the supplier perspective, there is no subscription to sign up at all. Just to be completely transparent, our business model is transactional. So you guys help bring business, or if we can help bring business to you, that's how we get paid.
Yeah. We have a question here from a buyer that says the use of my procurement department is mandatory. Do you have buyers who successfully got their procurement team to agree to use your platform?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that is one of the most organic ways for us to grow as a marketplace. If a buyer or the business unit is interested in using the platform, and when they bring that as a possible tool to procurement, procurement is never a hurdle for us. In fact, when they see our platform, they see it as a major improvement on typically their current processes for engaging with suppliers. So we welcome that, and any introductions you're willing to make, I would be happy to take that call. So thank you.
And just to add a bit on that, in terms of procurement, there's a lot of benefits for procurement directly as well. So of course, for the buyer, there's many benefits, like the fact that you can connect with suppliers and work right away. But from the procurement perspective, there's a lot of benefits as to the cost savings and time savings of initiating separate MSAs with new suppliers, for example. So we see on average about 6 to 8 weeks of time savings just by avoiding that direct MSA process and vendor setup in the systems, because that all flows through Scientist.com. So there's great benefits from procurement as well.
Mm-hmm. So we do have lots and lots of questions here about how procurement views this. What processes do you go through, Dave, when you're on the front lines with these buyers to work with procurement? Do you sit down with them? Do you give information to the researcher to help engage with procurement? What support do you offer?
Yeah, so we call it internal evangelizing, right? And a lot of companies, I guess, would refer to in that same way. It goes both directions. A lot of times we have interest that begins with procurement because they see the tool as something that can help them, beyond the HEOR and RWE space. Maybe they're looking at it for a variety of different, categories. Those conversations, then we have to go sell to, the business unit and make sure that they want to use it, right? It's the same thing if a buyer is interested in using the platform, making the introductions to the proper decision makers in procurement, to myself and to Maria and to the rest of the Scientist.com team is usually the best go. We can be your partners in that internal selling process. We also have literature, we have talking points, we have all sorts of things to help. And so ultimately what happens is this becomes a three-way relationship where everybody needs to trust each other and see the value. And that's what we help coordinate.
Mm-hmm. I suppose the same might be true for legal as well. What types of experiences have you had there?
Yeah, one of the most disruptive things we do is pre-executing, this master service agreement with all of these suppliers. In the past, that was a conversation that was a little more difficult with legal because they had never seen something like this. But today, as Maria showed you, there was hundreds of millions of dollars being run through this legal setup. It's tried and true. Most lawyers and general counsels are open to the idea, are interested in learning more. And we approach it the same way that I mentioned before. We bring in our team, we bring in our GC. She's more than happy to have conversations with legal. So let our team, help make that connection and drive that value proposition for legal.
Great. Maria, this is for you. Once they initiate a request and then execute it through the marketplace, does everything have to then be executed within the marketplace, or can the buyer communicate with the supplier outside of the marketplace?
That's a great question. So what we aim to do is just provide that connection, yet enable you to perform business as usual. So we enable you to get to know new suppliers, but as soon as a request is initiated on the marketplace, you can communicate as you wish off platform. So that means that it's possible to have email discussions or in-person meetings pre-COVID, of course. Right now, probably WebEx or conference calls. So you can work however you wish. What we do recommend, of course, is leaving some trace of the conversation through the marketplace so that our internal team, like account managers or concierge, can follow up if there's anything to be needed. And then the transactions, of course, would flow through the marketplace in the sense that once a project is initiated, then the buyer would send the purchase order to Scientist.com, and Scientist.com would subsequently send it to the supplier. Same with the invoicing, the supplier invoices Scientist, and then Scientist invoices the buyer. However, the communications can happen as the supplier and buyer best see fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't aim to step in between the two parties at all.
Rather facilitate it.
Facilitate that stuff that none of us like to do, right? All right. What if they need to change their project scope?
Well, that's definitely possible. So we have a process in place where as amendments can be added at any point. So if anything from the project changes or there needs to be a change order or add additional sections or parts to the project, we have a very simple process in place where the supplier submits an amendment, and then as with the initial purchase order, the buyer can just accept it and it will be updated quite easily on the marketplace.
I think you touched on this, but it's probably worth restating, just because master service agreements are so much a part of all of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
If there is an existing MSA with a supplier, can those terms be used?
And that's a great point. So in fact, our agreement is set up in a way where if there's an MSA in place, that supersedes our agreement. So you can in fact work through those same terms through the platform. In the cases where there isn't an MSA, then of course the Scientistcom legal terms would apply. So we enable those direct relationships as well.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I'm wondering what your experience has been with the marketplace. How can, in the COVID pandemic, with so much research getting initiated, particularly in the RWE arena, how can the marketplace support research in this area?
Patty, it's a great question. And, you know, COVID-19 has affected all of our lives in unique ways, but I think the workplace has been, you know, disrupted the most. We don't go to our offices. We don't go to our labs. We're working virtually. Our colleagues are just, you know, images on a screen these days. And it's the same thing with relationships, you know, with outsourcing, right? It's difficult to be talking with different sales reps and finding new companies to get your projects done. And since we've all been forced to virtualize more, it's actually been, you know, a little bit of a gold rush for, you know, companies like ours, just simply because we're helping to facilitate those relationships quickly. And so I think the answer is, because the access to suppliers is so quick and our contracting is so quick, people have turned to Scientistcom to outsource more during this time. And I think that the beauty of it is they're enjoying that. They're enjoying the speed. And even when we can go back to working together and shaking hands, this is still going to be a great tool to, you know, to facilitate that introduction.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you. Well, I'm going to close out our panel now. We've got a number of other questions, but I want to absolutely ensure each of you that have submitted questions, if we didn't answer it, then Maria, Dave, or I will follow up directly with you. We know you've submitted them, and we're going to make sure you get those questions answered. So, Dave, thank you so much for bringing the perspective from the front lines. And I also have to note that Dave has coined a new term, virtualize. I have not heard that before. So
that's agreed.
I imagine we're going to be seeing that even more. All right, thank you, Dave. And Maria, I'll turn it over to you to go close out the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Patty. And Dave. So before we close out the webinar, we'd love to just show you a sneak peek. You might be wondering how the marketplace looks. So I'll just show you very quickly how it looks. If you would like a more in-depth demo, we'd be glad to get on a call and show you as well. So this is the Health Economics and Scientist.com HEOR and RWE Marketplace. So once you log in, then you will see your profile right here. So this is my profile. You will see your name and your title here, and then you'll see a recently updated request right here to the left. So from this home page, you can do many things like favorite services, for example, if there is a service or a supplier that you frequently send out a request to, and then you can easily request a custom service or a product by just typing here. So something to point out is that you can initiate a request by service or by a supplier. If you want to work directly with a supplier, you can just type in their name. Or if you want to initiate a service, which is how many of our buyers initiated, then they would type it here. So for this demo, I will use systematic literature review. You will see as I start typing, the different services and suppliers under that service start popping up. So once you click on the systematic literature review, it brings you straight to a page like this one, which is a request page in which you can edit your title if you wish. So in this case, I will click on test just for demo purposes. And then you can enter a service or product description for what you're looking for. As I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be a complete proposal. You can also initiate a request with a question just to scope out the market, see what is out there. So for this case, I'll add test. Alternatively, if you do have a full completed proposal, then you can add a file here and attach it to the request too. So once you add your shipping details, it will bring you to the supplier selection page. So for demo purposes, I've just included these two demo accounts, Beachside Biotechnology and Triage Pharmaceuticals, which of course are fake. In reality, if you log in as a buyer, you will be able to see the list of all the different suppliers that have signed up to perform the service. You can select them right here with a check, and then you'll be able to see the number of requests that they've completed so far. So by clicking on any of their names, you will be able to see their description, if they have any media, and then more information about the suppliers too. So once that's done, you would click on initiate request here. At this point, our concierge team would receive it, and then they would just review it, make sure that everything looks good, send it out to the suppliers for review. And this is what a project looks like with supplier responses. So you can see that there is a participating supplier section here at the top, where you would see the different proposals from the suppliers, as well as be able to send a message. And to view the statements of work, you can click on any of them, and it will show you the different bill to, ship to addresses, as well as the milestones and the pricing. So in order to compare proposals side by side, you can click on this compare feature. You'll be able to see the proposals side by side, as we mentioned, like if it were an eBay purchase, which makes it quite simple. In terms of communicating with the Scientistcom internal team, we have a chat here where you can enter your private message and send it as well in case of any questions. And then finally, once you know who you want to work with, then you would accept this, select this accept statement of work button, select your proposal, select finalize order, and then as soon as we receive the purchase order from the buyer side, then we would send a simultaneous purchase order to the supplier. When we receive the invoice, then we would invoice the buyer. So this concludes the short demo I had for this case. And of course, if you had any questions or would like to schedule a more in-depth demo, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much to everyone for joining. Really appreciated having you on the line today in this hour. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to Patti or myself or to Dave, and we'd be happy to answer your questions or get on a call with you or your team.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria. And Dave, thank you for adding to the conversation. You see our emails up there. Reach out to us. We'll also connect you with Dave if you want him to come in and do a presentation. Well, no coming in, if you want him to make a presentation to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana to close us out. Don't forget to download those handouts before you go. Dana?
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, Faster Science, HEOR RWE and Market Access Sourcing, co-sponsored by Scientistcom and HealthEconomics.com. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email shortly with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of our speakers, Maria, Dave, and Patti from Scientistcom and HealthEconomics.com, thanks for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.